Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another Woodbrew video. In today's video, I'm going to be making this really cool multi-use jig. So this jig will allow you to joint boards, it'll allow you to taper boards, it'll also let you do hard and complex cross cuts as well. And that's going to be really useful for a project that we're working on right now. It's a dining table, but it's got some really difficult geometry. So this board is tapered. It's also cut on an angle this way and cut on an angle this way. And we're able to do all of that using this jig, and it's the reason why I'm building it. Now, I saw this jig actually on Jody from Inspired Woodworks channel. I made some changes to it. He offered like a free set of plans in his description, so go check out that video. But I'm also going to do the same thing. It's just going to be a simple drawing giving you the dimensions, because I did change some things up from his design, and you'll see how that works later in the video. But without further ado, let's get started cutting some plywood. Also, side note, Molly is not in the shop today, so she's not helping me film. She actually helped film a couple of the opening scenes, but that's it. So I apologize if this video is not as good as normal. So as far as cutting plywood goes, it's really simple. All we have to do is create two rectangles essentially, and you can use pretty much any plywood you want. I used some leftover maple plywood that we had from the platform bed build. If you had some Baltic birch, clearly that would be an even better choice to use. But honestly, for this, as long as it's somewhat flat, that's all you really need. And you just need at least one good straight edge on the boards. And again, there'll be a link in the description where you can just download the exact dimensions you need, but they're just rectangles, so nothing complex here. So this jig actually has a handful of slots that we need to be able to cut in there. There's a lot of different ways we could cut these, but this also has to be recessed as well for the head of the bolt, and that's the reason why the best way to cut these is going to be a router, because doing this recessed pocket would be very difficult using pretty much anything else. So we're going to be using a router to cut these slots in. So we're going to use a 3/8 inch router bit to go all the way through, and then we're going to be using a 3/4 inch router bit here on the back to be able to widen that slot for the heads of the bolts. As far as what bits we're going to be using for this project, this is the 3/8 inch spiral upcut bit from Bits and Bits. It has their Astra coating on it, means it lasts a lot longer. This is a super high quality bit. I'll leave a link in the description below to it. Bits and Bits is also a supporter of our channel, so if you use the coupon code in the description, you get 15% off. This is the bit that's going to be cutting all the way through. And then for the other side, we're going to be using their plywood, undersized plywood dado set. I'm just using the 3/4 inch version out of this. You can just use a 3/4 inch one. This is just what I have, and this is what we use on a regular basis. You saw us use this in the plywood platform bed build. And if you're interested to know exactly what it is I'm doing and how to do it with the router, check out the video we published last week where I show how to cut all the joinery for that plywood platform bed. I go into great detail about how to use a router and actually cut through a material like this and cut dados. So check that video out, and let's get rolling on cutting all of these dados. So we're almost ready for assembly, but before we start assembling things, we need to add a runner here, and this is going to allow this whole unit to slide in the miter slot. And the reason I chose to do it this way, because a lot of people just run it against the fence, is I added this slot down here, which lets me move that fence backwards and use this as a crosscut sled. It basically lets me do a larger panel in here, or even a smaller piece doing a really complicated angle that would be much more difficult to do on, say, just like a small miter gauge that you push through. So I wanted to have this actual guide in here so that I didn't have to use the fence, because if I use the fence, then the piece would get in the way of it. So that's my reasoning for actually adding this. If you don't plan on using that part of the functionality of the jig, then you actually don't need this. You can just run it against your fence. But anyway, I digress. The way that I actually attached this one was I just used a little bit of super glue and stuck it down and used the fence as a guide. Now I showed this in great detail in the crosscut sled video that we published a couple weeks ago. So I'll just tell you to go watch that, because the footage I have of this just disappeared. I either didn't hit record or I don't know what happened. I had the first like 10 seconds and the rest of it is just gone. But I actually used this old runner off of a rockler jig that I had that just no longer worked with my table saw because I'd cut it up so many different ways and times. So I just salvaged this off of there, but I'll leave links in the description to some other commercially available versions of these so that you can buy one if you want. But if you don't want to, then you can just watch the video of the crosscut sled and I'll show you how to do the same exact thing with just a piece of hardwood. But either way, I just wanted to explain why I chose to use this, and you'll see that later in the video when I actually show this thing in use. Also, I will say that before we put this thing together, I went ahead and sprayed this entire thing with a handful of coats of spray lacquer just to have a little bit of protection on it for the future. And with that out of the way, it's time for assembly. And honestly, this jig is that simple. That's what I liked about this one when I saw the design and why I wanted to build one for our shop. It's just really easy to build. So this center middle fence piece needs to have a 3/8 inch hole drilled in it. I used a Forstner bit because that creates a really clean hole, but I actually did a 1 inch counterbore on the other side, thinking in my head that the bolt needs to be countersunk. It doesn't. It goes all the way through the table. And so this counter bore here is useless. It doesn't affect the performance on mine at all, but you don't need to drill the 1 inch counter hole. You just need to do the 3/8 hole through the middle. So it's time to attach the center fence piece. And before we attach it, I actually added some 120 grit sandpaper to the back here. This is just gonna help keep it stuck down to the table whenever we tighten it down. I just spray adhesive this on. It's not 100% necessary, but I decided to add it because why not? And also, before we attach this fence down, we actually need to add on our clamps, which there's a lot of different methods for, how to clamp things, and that basically ends up being personal preference. But the things that you're gonna need are a T-bolt for the center hole. You're gonna need a T-bolt. You're gonna need some type of star knob. There's all different kinds, and you're also gonna need a washer. Now these are 1/4 inch T-bolts, and that's what's gonna be able to attach this piece down. And as far as the clamps go, I'm using some more of these Rockler hold downs. Now these things come in a bunch of different sizes, and you actually can change these out. So if you needed to do something bigger, you could use these. That's part of the reason why I left this piece so wide. But also Jody used these hold down style things. These weren't as appealing to me because I don't typically do the same exact thing a lot, but I even thought about adding these to the other side so that when I do use basically 3/4 inch material or the same size material over and over and over again, I could just use these, or anytime I want to set up a repetitive jig, I pop these on there and we go for it. So basically just need to add those pieces on, and then we'll stick a T-bolt through the bottom hole, stick it up through, and then add our star knob, and this thing is assembled and ready to use. Let's take a second to talk about today's sponsor, Surfshark. So you guys have seen me talking a lot about Surfshark VPN recently, and they actually are having a really good Black Friday sale right now. You can get 83% off with 4 months free if you use the link in the description below and code Woodbrew. And that is a phenomenal deal to start securely browsing the internet from your phone and your computer and all your devices, including smart TVs. You can start browsing basically from anywhere in the world, and it's a lot more secure. So whenever you're doing all of that online shopping this year for Cyber Monday or Black Friday, you're actually gonna be able to do that in a lot more secure fashion, since I know a lot of us are gonna be shopping from home this year. If you have no idea what a VPN is, then just hear me out for just a second and I'll explain why you should probably have one. So a VPN helps mask your identity online. It also encrypts your information, therefore making it much more difficult for hackers to be able to get your important details like credit card information. It also helps hide your IP address, which helps keep you from getting pesky ads that are catered exactly towards you. But also the really cool thing is that if you need to be able to surf the internet from a different part of the world, like if you're trying to see something on Netflix that's not available in your country, or you're trying to be able to buy something that's not available in your region, then you can actually use Surfshark VPN to browse from basically anywhere in the world and make that happen. With Black Friday going on, some deals are only available in certain places, so being able to take advantage of using your VPN to basically put yourself browsing from that location will allow you to get access to those deals. But the bigger thing for me is the Netflix part, because there are a lot of shows that aren't available in the US, and it quickly opens up the horizons of what you can watch on Netflix. I just finished reading a Harry Potter book and I wanted to watch a movie. It wasn't available in the United States, but if I browse from Poland on the VPN, then all of a sudden it becomes available on Netflix, which is really awesome. So you can go and you can actually Google what shows are available in other countries, and then you can browse from those countries and get access to a whole lot of other content that wasn't already there. So if you guys are interested in getting yourself a VPN, I highly recommend it. I've been a customer of Surfshark's for several years now, and I'll leave a link in the description below. If you want to check it out, now's the time to do it. You get a great deal on it and you can instantly use it. So without further ado, let's get back to the build. Okay, so it's time to use this jig. Now it can be used in a lot of different ways, but I'm gonna show you how I did this piece here just because it shows you a lot of different ways you can use it. So basically all you're gonna do is you're gonna mark your board out. You just basically lay out one of your boards that's gonna get it just the way you need it. Then you just sort of line those marks up with your board. You're gonna bring this guy over to it, tighten it down, and you're gonna use these clamps to hold it, and then you can cut it. I mean, it's really that simple. Basically, you just need to make the lines on here. You can see that that is cut on a pretty steep angle there. And all that was just by lining it up with the edge with those marks, clamping this board down and clamping it to it. Now, if you have some longer pieces like this table leg, I actually just, to keep things repetitive, I just kept lining the edge up with the bottom. And that way, whenever this was run through, they're all exactly the same because they're referencing off this line back here. If you have a smaller piece, you can do that as well by just moving this down to one of the lower slots, or by just making a mark on the table to make sure that they constantly line up in the same spot every single time. It's really that simple. And also, if you move this piece to the lower spot, it also lets you do a cut more like this one, where I'm doing basically just a cross cut, and it can be super repetitive. Again, you can move this down here if you want to get it closer to you, and that's the reason for this slot. Now you can also use this jig to do some jointing as well, and it works super good. So in this clip I'll show you in a minute, I'm going to be jointing this piece of hard maple here, and all you have to do is lay it on the jig, get your sides basically of your board just over the edge of the jig, just like that, lock the jig down, and then clamp it using your clamps right here, and then run it through the saw. I'm also sure that there's just so many other things that I'm not thinking about of ways you could actually use this jig, but that's kind of the beauty of the way this thing is set up. You literally can attach things to it. You can do all kinds of different stuff with it and do some really unique tasks that sometimes are really difficult. I mean, this piece right here would not have been fun to make without having this. And I would say it would have been almost impossible to make it as well as this without having this jig here, or a large template, or having to do some hand plane work. I mean, this just makes this stuff so much easier. So I'm gonna wrap this video up by just playing some clips of me actually using the jig, and you guys are gonna be seeing me use this jig to make a dining table base coming up in a video in a couple of weeks, so be on the lookout for that. Download the plans in the description below if you want to build this yourself. Check out the links in the description below. Most of those links are going to be affiliate links, so at no extra cost to you, it really helps us out and helps this channel out. And with that said, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Check out the clips at the end. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this jig. And thanks, Jody, again for inspiring this build. It really is going to help me out in the shop a lot with our next project. Thanks, guys. I'll see you later.